I'd like to welcome up next Scott Logie. So we're just going to get the slides up for Scott. So as I said at the beginning, Scott is Customer Engagement Director at an organisation called Sagacity. I'm sure Scott will expand on that a bit, but Sagacity are an organisation that help other organisations get the most out of their data and make sensible decisions based on that data. So Scott, can I hand over to you?
Yeah, of course.
Pick up from here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kate. Good afternoon, everyone. As Kate said, I work for a company called Sagacity. We're a data and insights consultancy. We work with lots of different brands to help them, as Kate said, understand what data they've got. There's a lot of work around the compliance and the management of that data, making sure that it's in a format they can use, and then exploiting that data to help them to sell better ultimately to their end customers. So what I'm going to do this afternoon is just talk generically a bit about segmentation, and in particular how organizations use their customers, or indeed the overall data that's available on a market, to help them to market better or sell better. And I guess when we're going through this, we are bearing in mind we're trying to sell the competition site. And so what I'm really trying to get across is that if you try and sell to absolutely everybody, you're probably going to miss your market effectively. So what we're really trying to do is narrow down those people that we think are likely to buy this product based on the different criteria that we can use to do that. And I don't know where this particular quote came from. If you're marketing to everyone, you're marketing to no one, but I really like it. It's not saying by any stretch of the imagination that you're marketing to literally no one. What it's saying is if you try and create something that's very generic and market to a mass market, if you like, then the chances are you're going to miss your audience, who are the people that are more likely and more interested to be wanting to buy your particular product. So if we just move on to the next slide. So what do we mean by segmentation? Well, for me, segmentation is the bridge between mass marketing, i.e. brand marketing, TV, radio, cinema advertising, where you're basically putting an advert out there and hoping that you get the right audience, down to individual marketing, where you're basically selling your product to each person uniquely. And I'm sure Sarah would love to sit down with every single one of the 3.2 million companies are in the UK, explain to them exactly why they should be using her website and why they should be using her competition platform. But the ability to do that and the cost to do that is massive. And so we have to find something that sort of bridges between that overall mass marketing and individual marketing. And really that comes down to segmentation. And what we mean by segmentation is basically grouping people together who look like each other, or in this case, businesses, in order to find the ones that are most likely to buy your particular product. Now, when it comes to larger organizations or people that are selling lots of different products, they would therefore have lots of different segments that they would be selling to. And so what we tend to do to begin with is to look at the people within the base that we've already sold to, and what different types of groups or segments we have within that base, and then profile those to find the ones that we're going to sell the right product to at the right time. And so it's kind of this bit in the middle between not being able to sell to absolutely everyone, but at the same time not trying to market to all the businesses in the country. So if you click again, please. So there are lots and lots and lots of different types of segmentation or ways in which you can segment. So just running through these. The first one is geographic segmentation, which is really where you're grouping together.
Bigger ones are just under 1 million a year, but you get
So we're grouping together people who, companies or individuals who are based in the same geography, effectively. Now, for Sarah, that might be quite useful. So she might have a field sales team, for example, who can go out and visit some companies. And so we want to give those field sales team a list of organizations to go after. And so we could group different companies together that are in different places. So someone's based in Liverpool, so let's give them all the companies that are in Liverpool that meet the criteria we're interested in, and they could go out and visit those particular companies. Geographic segmentation is also used by people like supermarkets, for example. When they open a new supermarket, they want to attract all
a lot of money.
I mean,
I could sell my house, pay off the mortgage, and I'd be able to watch about 3 months worth of matches.
That's nice. Supermarkets will use geographic segmentation when they open a new store. They'll look at the geography of where that store catchment is, and then they'll maybe send out an offer to everyone who lives within that catchment to attract them to go to the new supermarket rather than the one that's already there, that's a rival supermarket. So that's basically using geography to group people together and to market in a particular way. Demographic segmentation is more about who people are. So that's grouping people together based on their age, their gender, their income, their family status, their hobbies, their interests, all of that different stuff that tells us a bit more about who people are. That's used quite often when looking to sell particular products which are targeted at particular age groups or targeted at particular subsets of customers. So for example, someone like Tesco, before you buy at Tesco, if you join the club card and you don't know, they don't know the history of what kind of products you buy, they will use a demographic segmentation to say people like you tend to buy these particular products. So the first offers we'll give you will be based on the kind of person you are rather than your behavior and the kind of stuff that you will then buy over time. So that second segmentation that Tesco will then do is what we call behavioral segmentation, which is the what one on this screen. So that's where they track the purchases that you make, and then they'll group you into groups similar to people who make purchases like you. So, for example, if you're buying a lot of alcohol, then they'll probably group you together with other people that buy alcohol, and then they'll give you offers of other stuff that you might buy. It might be crisps or nuts or, other stuff that you might have with that, with your alcohol, for example. Within the what segmentation, we also use quite a lot of what we call RFM, which is recency, frequency, monetary value. And we're basically looking at what you bought, when you bought it, and how often you bought it as well. And Tesco, for example, will use a lot of their transactional data to do that sort of RFM type segmentation. I skipped over one in the middle there, which is psychographic segmentation, which is really based around why. We see this type of segmentation quite often within the charity sector, for example. So why do people give to particular charities? Normally, this segmentation is based on some market research, which tries to dig under the motivations, the opinions of people, group together people who have got similar motivations and interests, and then try and replicate those groups across the rest of the base. And that gives them an understanding in terms of why they do a particular thing, why they buy a particular product, why they buy a particular service, why they give to a particular charity, and that then helps to tailor what the offers or the marketing might be to those individuals. And then finally, we have sort of what we call predictive segmentation, which is really more about looking at the groups of customers who are likely to be valuable at some point in the future. So I was having a conversation about this morning, for example, with a telco company who, as soon as someone takes out their latest telephone contract or their phone contract, they're already looking to predict what the likely value of that customer is going to be in 2 or 3 or 4 years down the line. And the reason that they need to do that is because they want to predict who's likely to churn, who's likely to be highly valuable, and who's likely to lose their money. The people that lose their money, clearly they don't want to spend much time and effort in terms of marketing, but the ones who are high value and likely to churn when the contract comes up are ones that they're very interested in terms of trying to keep, and therefore they want to build a relationship with those people, but they need to understand that early, and so you're using predictive data to help you to work out who those segments are likely to be in the future. So as you can see, there's lots and lots of different ways in which you can segment a customer base or a market. And I think bear in mind for the challenge that we have here, that Sarah doesn't have any customers. So really what you're trying to do is to help her to identify the types of organizations who are likely to be interested in her particular product. Now, that doesn't mean that you should exclude any particular type of customer, but maybe it would be useful to think about the different types of organizations that are available or around, how you could group those into particular groups, and then what sort of marketing you could use to engage those particular types of organizations. So click again, please. Thank you very much. So once we've sort of alighted on the type of segmentation that we do, there's some, if we're doing this on a consumer base, so for example, if we're segmenting a retail organization's base normally there's a huge amount of data that we can use to build that segmentation. Often we also add in external third-party data, as we call it, so data that's available commercially to supplement the data that the organization will have. So for example, Tesco, as I've been using them as an example, they have loads and loads of data about transactions and what people buy, where they buy it, who buys online, who buys offline, who buys in the store. But what they don't often know are things like what age the customer is, whether they have a pet or not, what kind of household they live in. And so they'll bring that extra data in externally, add it to the data that they've already got, and then they'll use all of that to build their segmentation. And so they often there's a combination of both the behavioral stuff, which is the transactional data that you get from the organization, and then the sort of demographic stuff that you get from that third party or from that external company that you can use to supplement your segmentation. We then chuck that into different statistical tools, and there's lots of different statistical ways to do the segmentation. I've kind of dropped out the slides here around the different types of segmentation, but you can have a look online, and there's lots of different ways you can actually build that segmentation. There's a few things that we always try and think about when we're looking at segmentation. It's a combination of science and art, I think. There is obviously a mathematical element to it, which is the science side. But actually, if you want to apply it and use it within an organization, then there's a bit of an artistic side to this as well. And some of the decisions that you need to make are around the size of each segment, how big it's going to be. If you have one segment that's 80% of the customer base, for example, that's not particularly useful. On the other hand, you don't want to have 400 segments of 30 people in them because, again, that's way too many for anyone to deal with in terms of creating marketing plans and marketing strategies around about it. So what we normally do is sit down with the organization up front and say, realistically, how many segments are you looking for? Is it sort of 5, 10, 20? And are you going to be able to use those segments in the right way to build up differentiated marketing plans and different strategies? And some very, very big organizations will still narrow down to somewhere between 5 and 10 segments, because realistically, that's the size of the time that they've got, if you like, to actually build those segments. So it's really important to get both the number of segments that you want to deal with and then the size of each segment in terms of how much of the base that's going to cover. And there's a bit of a rule of thumb that if you've got, say, 10 segments, then you should generally have nowhere less than 3 or 4% in one segment and nowhere above 20% in another segment. But that kind of varies with the number of segments that you've got, obviously. The second thing we need to look at is discrimination, which is how well does each group come together, but also how separate are they from all of the other groups as well. And ultimately, that's what the mathematical side of things is trying to do, is bring together groups of people who look very similar to each other, but who look different from the other groups as well. But often when we look at the data, it's hard to distinguish why that's happened. And if we can't distinguish why it's happened, it's then very difficult to explain that back to the marketers in terms of how they're going to market to those people. So there needs to be an element of common sense applied to it, as well as the mathematical side of things as well. And often that means that we'll use a smaller number of variables to build the segments or describe the segments than we have available. If you add too much data in, sometimes you get way too much differentiation, and then it's very difficult to explain it. The other thing that we look at is how often we need to rebuild or refresh the segmentation. This isn't something you want to be doing every day. It's probably not something you want to be doing every month or every year, to be honest. It's something that you want to live with for a period of time. But again, that's part of the sort of beginning of the project and setting up the project, is to ensure that we have those conversations. And again, ease of adoption in terms of how well that segmentation is going to be used internally is very important. And one of the key things that we work on quite often is buy-in across the organization, so that the same segments are being used by the call center or the service people as are being used by the marketing people, so that you get that kind of understanding that if someone says this is a segment 3, that everyone knows that that's a leisure seeker, and that's the sort of description that we have of those segments. So there's quite a few things that we need to consider when we're building a segmentation. You probably don't need to go into that much depth for this particular challenge, but it's worth bearing in mind as you think about the market that you're going to take Sarah's product to, how you break that market down, how you describe the kinds of people you're going to go after, and then when Cordell goes through his piece, how you're going to market to those people as well. So if you go on to the next one, please, Lisa. So the next couple of slides are really based around how we describe our segments. And there's a couple of things which are really important here, which is around profiling the segmentation so that we can actually pull out what types of people they are. And there's some examples there on the right-hand side. But then the second thing is about how we then describe those segments in a way that people can buy into, understand, and try and recognize. And some of the ways that we've done this in the past, for example, are creating top trump cards, creating Facebook personas for these kind of people, different segments, just stuff that can actually allow us to hang our hat a little bit in terms of what types of people these are. So what we do then is we create profiles of the segments. We look at the segments and we ask people to describe who these people are. We consider what kind of products we want to be selling to those particular segments, or what kind of products they've already bought. At this stage, we also encourage that it's not a bad thing to either merge or to split segments. So if we do the description and we find that two segments are really similar, there's no reason why we can't bring those together and just create one super segment of those two. On the other hand, we might find that actually it'd be better to split a segment down into two distinct groups, because there are two different things going on within that segment. And again, we shouldn't be afraid to do that if that's the right thing to do as well. And that's, again, this combination of art and science. The science might have grouped them together for a reason, but, you know, just from a marketing point of view, it might make much more sense just to separate them out again. And then there's a whole lot of stuff that we do just to help embed the segments into organizations that including in reporting and financial tracking and such like, to make sure that those segments become recognizable to people within the organization. So let's just give you an example. This is, an insurance company. This particular insurance company sold car insurance and home insurance primarily to over 50s customers. What they asked us to do actually was to segment their existing customers to help them to understand more about the customers they have, and therefore what sort of products they should be upselling and cross-selling to them. When we built this, when we looked at the data, we found that actually most of their customers were over 70, and a very high percentage of them were over 80. So actually segmenting them wouldn't help, because they aren't the kind of people that are going to make money for them for a long time into the future. So instead of actually segmenting their customer base, we segmented the whole of the UK around insurance needs, and what kind of insurance needs that they had within different life stages and different ages. So we created 10 what we call macro segmentation, which macro segments, which these are the ones here. And then we had 25 micro segmentations which sat underneath them. And the micro segmentation was based around things like travel insurance, pet insurance, gadget insurance, stuff that was more relevant to the particular subgroups, whereas the macro segmentation was based around need for home insurance, car insurance, at a particular time as you go through your sort of life journey. And so what they did actually was they picked 3 or 4 of these segments as to be the key ones that they wanted to sell their products to, primarily the ones that were a bit more affluent, who looked very similar to their older customers who were all in the loyal golden years segment, but who had that younger profile and therefore were likely to be with them and stay with them as customers for a lot longer. So what you see here is basically sort of like a high level view of each of the segments. If we then click again, this is what we did in terms of actually going under the skin of these particular segments and then describing what they look like in a lot more detail. And I think the key thing to bear in mind within this often is that data people are very driven by key facts and information, whereas marketers are more driven by sort of profiles, personas. Who is it I'm selling to? What do they look like? And so we find that it's important to build a bit of an example of both. So one where you've got all of the hard facts, the data that says, this is what this segment looks like based on the data that we use to build it. But actually, here's a bit of a profile in terms of a descriptor of what this segment looks like, which we tend to call either a pen portrait or a persona. And therefore, when you come to marketing your product, you want to think about the best way to sell that product to that particular persona. And so you have a good vision in your head in terms of what that person's like, what their lifestyle is like, what their friends are like, where they spend their time, what sort of social media platforms they're on. And therefore, you can be a lot more targeted in terms of the way that you sell to them and the products you sell to them. So if you click again, Lisa, just a couple of other examples of segmentation. So the one in the top left-hand corner there is for Moonpig. With Moonpig, we found they were marketing to everyone as if they were basically 35 to 45-year-old women. And when we drilled into their customer base, we found there was lots of different groups of customers there who were buying from them. For example, one of the segments, we didn't actually call them lazy men, but that's actually what they were. They were men who always forgot their mum's birthday or Valentine's Day or Mother's Day. They bought a card the day before to get it delivered in time, but they always bought a gift as well. And that was really profitable for Moonpig because gifts are where they tend to make their money. So what Moonpig did was basically create an app where you could input all of your dates of your sister's birthday, your auntie's birthday, Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, etc. And Moonpig would prompt you with what you bought last year to make sure you didn't buy the same product again. And another segment we had with Moonpig was a group of very old women who bought 25 cards on average from Moonpig, but got them all sent to them. Rather than getting them sent to the person they were sending them to, they got them all sent home so they could write their own little message to their nephew or their niece or their grandson or granddaughter into the card. And we worked out that if we could retain that particular segment for a year, it would be over £1 million profit to Moonpig in just retaining 10% more of them. So you can see by just breaking down the base into a bit more detail, then creating strategies for that base, you can target better, therefore you can sell your product better. I won't touch on the other ones, but one of the other ones that was in there was actually for an online dating service, which might be the most exciting data set we've ever had to analyze, to be honest. It was fantastic. The headline, men are a bit shit, basically, is where it came down to. So men would get drunk, sign up to the app, spend 12 months worth of buy for 12 months because it was cheaper, and then never contact anyone ever again, which was fantastic for the app, a bit rubbish for the men that spent all their money, unfortunately. Fine, sorry, on to the next one, Lisa. So just this is the final slide, really. So what I'm encouraging you to do now is have a think about Sarah's product that she's looking to sell. Have a think about all of the UK. In this particular case, you're looking at businesses within the UK, and try and create, I've suggested 5 different segments of businesses that Sarah could go ahead and sell her product to. Now, clearly you're not doing this using data, although you could do some research into how many businesses there are, what kind of size they are. But I think if you're going to sort of help Sarah to market her product, if we can narrow that down to 5 different subgroups of types of business that we're selling to, that will help us to then target the way that we market to those particular people and market this particular product to them. And so if there's one takeaway, I guess, from this session, it is don't try and sell everything to everyone. Think about who the different segments and the subsets of who you should be selling to are, and then how do you create and build those segments and target those segments better. Thank you very much.
Can I just add to that as well? Also, don't think that we've got it right, because we gave segmentation and groups in some of the earlier proposals, and it's like when you work, we've never done this before with a brand new product from launch. We've worked with things that have grown organically, so we've done our best guesses with things, and that's what they are really. So it gives you an opportunity to see what the segmentations could be and what you could see happening with the product. So yeah, don't get tied into thinking there's a definite right or wrong answer, because all the advice there is brilliant that's given. And we're in a situation here where you've not got the historic data, so it is yeah, it does leave lots of options open, but we do need segmented groups.
Are there any questions at this point from others on the call in relation to what you've just seen about segmentation and targeting, particularly if any of you have already, are into the brief and started? Scott, just wondered, watching through the presentation there and just thinking about B2B segmentation quite specifically, is there are there any golden rules, if you like, that are different with B2B segmentation?
Yeah, I think there is a much more, there's much more disparity, if you like, Kate, in B2B data. Yeah, because you've got your massive businesses down to your sort of solo businesses or one person businesses, and therefore, you know, it's a lot more difficult, I guess, to create segments without taking into account things like turnover and the size of the organization. Those things are really key, I think. If you think your product, for example, and I'm sure Sarah would love to sell her product to Tesco, as we talked about Tesco quite a bit, but that's quite a hard sell. Yeah, finding the right person, ensuring that you go and meet them, that's quite a difficult thing to do. Whereas you're likely to get much more traction with maybe sort of medium-sized organizations. And so I think you always have to start with that sort of like view of who am I likely to be able to engage with, and therefore what is the price point of my product and how can I sell to those particular businesses. The other thing I would bear in mind is at the end of the day, it's still about selling to people as well. So although this is a B2B exercise, we are still trying to find people within those businesses who are the right people to go and sell to. So although the data might say this particular business we're looking at is a business of 400 people and they turn over this amount of money and they're based in Liverpool or whatever it happens to be, it's still really key to find the key person within that business and therefore who I'm going to sell to within the business.
Yeah, that's good advice. I just want to pick up. So Kirk, did you have a question?
You kind of nicked it, Kate. Thank you, but I will add to it. I was just trying to jump in quicker. I was very, very insightful presentation, so thank you in terms of that. My question was really to lead on to that business question about discriminators. Do you feel they're different in a business-to-business setting than a consumer setting?
Yeah, it's much harder in business to business, actually, but partly because there's not as much data gathered on businesses as there are on people. You know, you've literally got hundreds of variables against each individual or each household or each postcode, whereas on businesses it tends to be a bit cold, the data, you know, size of business, number of people that work there, what sector they work in. You don't get that. It's very hard to get under the skin of the types of culture of the business and stuff, which you can get more from a human or a consumer point of view. So yeah, B2B segmentation is much more difficult. Obviously, if you got the time and the money and you can go out and do some research and try and get more of those qualitative type variables, then you can try and get under the skin of it a little bit more, but it's definitely more difficult.
Thank you, that was very helpful.
And Carolina, did you have a question?
Oh, yes. Hi, I'm here. So I'm Carolina. I'm the lecturer here in Northumbria London campus. I'm actually here with my students in class and we're all seeing the meeting. I have one question maybe for Sarah, if she could just share from her background with the DMRI. What was your perspective in terms of B2B clients? If there is no segmentation, how you used to know who your clients and put them into blocks? Maybe can you share with us?
Yeah, in our other side of the business, which is also B2B, where we're dealing with the clients, we've very much segmented based on needs and desires. So we've looked at the reasons why behind people are doing that, and we've gathered that information from speaking to existing clients and then profiled what their businesses look like so that we can then go after the same businesses. So when we first started that business, we originally thought it would be a lot of marketing agencies. And during quite early on, we realized that it was actually more the PR people within the marketing agencies. And that has led to now a big segmentation of PR agencies and PR people that we deal with. But that was my experience on consumer marketing is a lot easier with segmentation, and I'd echo that on the business side. So we tended to look at the motivations behind why people would do that and then look at the factual information of what those businesses look like. And that gave us enough profiled information to put together categories of people that fell into whether they were driven by sales, driven by data or driven by PR experience, and then we looked at within those sectors what each company looked like within that range, and it would often have a range of either this or this rather than a set criteria, but that's what we did. Does that answer your question? Sorry.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much. And once again, guys, thanks for the opportunity for us to be together and discuss the marketing challenge. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Thanks, Sarah.